Knicks what-ifs. Because them not trading for Mitchell now, with how he has ascended in Cleveland, and the big question with him was, what did we watch the last 2 years in Utah? Did we watch somebody who was just a really good offensive guard who stopped being a two-way player? Is this guy a franchise player? Is he almost a franchise player? What is he? When Russillo and I would talk about it last summer, I always defaulted to, we've at least seen him rise to the occasion in playoff series in a way that if he's your best guy, you could at least go toe-to-toe with the other team's best guy if he had the right team around him. And that's why we love the Cleveland trade so much, because we felt like this guy finally has the right team around him. Well, the Knicks would have been a good team too, because they basically would have to give up RJ Barrett and some picks. They could have kept Jalen Brunson. You just put him in the RJ Barrett spot. The Knicks are over 500 anyway. I defended the Knicks when that trade didn't happen. I thought they made a really good offer. I thought RJ Barrett and a couple picks was an awesome offer for Donovan Mitchell. And you could argue maybe even a better offer than what Cleveland got back for him. Although Markkanen has turned out to be pretty great. So we didn't know that last summer. Just last summer, I was like, Markkanen, Sexton, and some first. Is that enough? Now Markkanen's emerged as a probable all-star. But I thought the RJ Barrett and the picks offer was really good. I still don't know totally what happened with Utah and the Knicks. It was a little weird. But now it's turned into a what if, because Mitchell, imagine if he's doing this in New York. Imagine if he did that at MSG last night. Imagine if he did that for the Star for a Title Knicks fans. I think it's a what if. So it made me want to go through the Knicks what ifs. And I had done some of this in my book. I went back. I talked to a couple people. There's some honorable mention Knicks what ifs. What if Golden State passes on Steph Curry in 2009? It seemed like they were going to take him. They were either going to take him or trade the pick to Phoenix. Steve Kerr's talked about that. They didn't expect Curry to drop to 7. He did. And the catch is they had Monte Ellis. And I think there was a split second there when the Knicks fans were like, wait, they have Monte Ellis. They're not going to take Steph Curry too. And that Curry was going to fall to 8. It's an honorable mention. What if? I still don't think anyone's passing Curry at 7. It's amazing Minnesota passed on him twice. The Charles Smith game is another honorable mention. What if? Look, Charles Smith was who he was as a player. There's an angle of those plays where it's pretty physical. They could have called a foul on at least 2 of those Pippen swipes. And then who knows with that. But again, that's honorable mention. There's honorable mention for Durant in 2016 and Durant in 2019. Just in 2016, didn't even really take a meeting. 2019, it seemed like he was headed there and he ends up going to Brooklyn instead. But, they could have been in this whole Durant, Kyrie, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to be nice because Brooklyn's playing well. And then the other one was, there was a Kevin McHale offer sheet in 1982. It was the year the salary cap changed. And you could do these restricted free agent offers. And the Knicks decided they're going to make this big offer. It was 1983, my bad. The Knicks decided they're going to make this big offer for Kevin McHale. And Red Auerbach found out about it and made offers to Marvin Webster and Sly Williams and Rory Sparrow before the Knicks officially made the McHale offer, and made it so that the Knicks had to decide, do we want to lose all 3 of those guys to try to sign Kevin McHale, who we might not even get anyway? And the Knicks ended up re-signing their 3 guys. The Celtics keep McHale. It's kind of crazy to look back on because they should have just done everything they could to get Kevin McHale. He ended up being like one of the 35 best players of all time. And at the time, we knew he was really good, and Auerbach just outwitted them. But it's an honorable mention, what if. I think if you talk to Knicks fans, especially the ones around the 80s, the McHale offer sheet, and then they all feel like there was a moment where they could have had Chris Mullin when Chris Mullin was having problems. There was a Gerald Wilkins for Chris Mullin trade rumor that was floating around. And I think that's in the what if class. All right. So the actual what ifs. And these are in no particular order until we get to the last couple. To me, a huge what if is, what if they don't panic trade for Carmelo before he became a free agent? Because if you remember, for Carmelo, it was better to get traded then, because then he could get an extension with them that had the extra year on it. But the Knicks end up giving up Wilson Chandler, Gallinari, Raymond Felton, Mozgov, and their 2014 first. They get back Carmelo and Billups. They gave up so much that they don't really matter in the 2011 playoffs. It's basically just Melo and Billups and Amari. And then they use their amnesty on Billups instead of Amari. So they lose their amnesty in the trade too. They lock down Melo, and the team's never really good enough around him. They signed Tyson Chandler, but I always wonder what would have happened had they just not done anything, called Carmelo's bluff, and either they don't get him in free agency and they are able to still build around this young team and some cap space, or they get Carmelo and get to keep all their young dudes. It's the kind of thing you do when you haven't been good in a while and you panic. And I do feel like they panicked a little on that one. So that's one. We're going back to 1965. The Knicks have a choice between Bill Bradley and Rick Barry. And Rick Barry, when I did my book, I had him as the 25th best player ever. He was the best player on the 1975 Warriors who won the title. He should have won the MVP that year. They decide they're going to take Bill Bradley instead of Rick Barry in the draft. And the reason that was interesting was they couldn't get Bill Bradley for 2 years. He was on a Rhodes Scholarship going to Oxford. And they decided they wanted to wait. Barry was the scoring machine at the University of Miami. He goes to the Warriors and ends up lighting it up. They make the finals, I think, within 2 years. Had I been around, had I had my column in the mid-'60s, I would have been going nuts that they should have taken Rick Barry. It's also a what if for him because he ends up going there. He ends up signing with the ABA. He has to wait a year before he even plays. So he loses a year. He gets hurt. He basically loses 3 years of his prime because of injuries and lawsuits. For the Knicks, Barry becomes part of the 70 Knicks and the 73 Knicks, both of whom won titles. So it's a what if in the sense of they might not have won any titles. Here's what I wrote in my book. Barry was the second best passing forward of all time behind Larry Bird. If anyone could have fit in seamlessly with those Knicks teams, it's him. One of two extremes would have played out. Either Barry goes down as one of the 12 greatest players ever and a New York icon, or he goes down as a temperamental, annoying asshole whom everyone in New York despised before he finally got driven out of town for eyeballing Willis Reed after a drop pass, then getting thrown into the 15th row at MSG by Willis. It's one or the other. It's hard for me to believe he wouldn't have fit in with those Knicks teams. So as weird as it sounds, even though they win 2 titles, maybe they win more if they took Rick Barry. Or maybe he blows the whole thing up. I don't know. Either way, it's a what if. Bernard King tore his ACL during the year that ended up getting the Knicks Patrick Ewing. It is a massive what if because he never came back. The craziest stat ever is Bernard King never plays with Patrick Ewing. They play together once in the All-Star game, like 6 years later. But on paper, they have Bernard, who was like 34 a game. He gets hurt. They get Ewing out of it. And if we had like modern knee technology, Bernard's back in a year. Instead, he's out for like 2.5 years, ends up getting mad at the Knicks, leaves. They never play together. And that's a legitimate what if. I would put the Mitchell trade right here, probably under that, because if you put Mitchell on this Knicks team, then they're probably a top 5 team in the East. And then they're also one move away from really being something, because I think Brunson's been better than anyone expected. And just upgrading from Barrett, who I like, to Mitchell, I think is reason enough to think that they'd at least be like a fringe contender, but they'd have the foundation. They'd have Brunson, they'd have Mitchell, they'd have Randall, who they'd have him going again, cap space potentially. I think it's a pretty good one. Another what if, never hiring Isaiah Thomas. They do that in, I think, 2003. His first move is he trades Antonio McDyess and a bunch of other stuff and 2 first rounders in 2004 and 2010 to the Suns for Stephon Marbury and Penny Hardaway. Marbury is basically the equivalent of what's going to happen when somebody overpays for Trae Young in about a year. Just file that one away. Then he trades 2 unprotected firsts in 2006 and 2007, which was a pick swap for Eddie Curry and Antonio Davis and a first rounder. And those picks became LaMarcus Aldridge and Joakim Noah. So you just take those 2. He blew up 4 first round picks and basically wasted 5 years of a 10-year decade and had a huge sex scandal. And by the time it was over, They had to do this 2-year odyssey to create enough cap space to get LeBron and Wade, which is our next what if. The summer of 2010, LeBron and Wade and the Knicks fans get tricked. Maybe they tricked themselves into thinking, well, LeBron, he's going to want to come to the biggest city in the world. This is the move as a basketball player. He's got to come here, and he's going to bring his buddy Wade with him, or he'll bring Chris Bosh, or maybe he'll bring all three. And they end up going to Miami. They get nothing. They end up spending their cap space on Amari Stoudemire, who was awesome for a year, and then or less than a year, and then his knee went out on him. But it is crazy that we always thought for years and years, once the Knicks get cap space, and they'll be able to get, Durant or LeBron, and they never, ever get these guys. So that's that. All right, last what if is a big one. It deserves its own little section for the Knicks. So you go back to 1975, and the Knicks have had a decent kind of half-decade run at this point, right? 69 Knicks were really good. Lost to the Celtics, no shame in that. They win in 70. They win the title again in 73. Millions of books written about them. People love those Knicks teams. So if you're saying, like, when we get to 1975 and you're a Knicks fan, did this go okay? You would probably point to the 11 titles Boston won and be like, well, that part sucked, but got some momentum here. We won in 70. We won in 73. We had this iconic team. Everyone wrote these books about them. Beautiful basketball, the whole thing. So then 1975, it's starting to die down. DeBusschere and Reed, I think both of those guys are gone at that point. Monroe and Frazier are still there. Kareem becomes available. He tells the Bucks during the 74-75 season, I'm out. Like, you gotta get rid of me. So the Knicks, he wants to go to the Knicks. He's from New York. That's his number one choice. So they start negotiating with the Knicks at the end of that season. They offer the Bucks $1.5 million and some draft picks for Kareem. And the Bucks GM was Wayne Embry, former Celtic, laughs him off. It's like, no way, not enough. He ends up dealing Kareem to the Lakers. The Lakers had the 2nd and the 8th pick, so he gets both of those. They take Dave Myers and Junior Bridgman. Get Brian Winters, who was a good player. He made 2 All-Star teams, great beard, love Brian Winters, and Elmore Smith, and they get $800,000, way more than the Knicks could offer. But the New York Times reported that the Knicks, if they had offered $4 million, they could have gotten Kareem. That's it. I don't even know if they needed to have picks. Just $4 million, you can have them, and maybe throw in a couple first. Who knows? The Knicks were cash poor because they had just spent $2.4 million on George McGinnis, who is an awesome ABA player, came to the NBA, wasn't that good. Here's the problem. George, his draft rights belong to the Philadelphia 76ers. So they get him as a free agent. They commit this money that now they can't spend on Kareem. And then the NBA voids the George McGinnis trade because his rights belong to the Sixers. Not only do they void it, they strip the Knicks of their 1976 number 1 pick for illegally signing George McGinnis. So you go from could have just spent $4 million on Kareem to now I don't have George McGinnis and I lost my number 1 pick, which would have been, if you go back, either the 6th or the 7th pick. Well, Adrian Dantley went 6th. Robert Parrish went 8th. So that kind of sucked. So then on top of it, they panic and they trade for Spencer Haywood, who I wrote a whole thing in my book about, the broken mirror. He was bad luck wherever he went, just bad luck left and right. He was this guy that was supposed to be, one of the great forwards of the 70s. Had some issues in Seattle. The Knicks end up, we'll get Spencer Haywood. He's a big name. He cost them $1.3 million. He cost them the 9th pick in 1975 that they had to trade. So they go from, instead of Kareem, they lose 2 first-round picks and get Spencer Haywood, who ends up on 3 more teams in the next 4 years. Even worse, that leads to a year later, the ABA-NBA merger. The Nets can't afford Dr. J. They have to spend so much money just to get into the league that they know they can't afford Dr. J. Well, what about the Knicks? The Nets owed the Knicks for 10 years when they joined the league $480,000 per year. So they say to the Knicks, you waive that penalty for us, the territorial penalty. It's $4.8 million over the next 10 years. You waive it. it's done. We'll give you Dr. J, but you waive that penalty. And the Knicks say no. They're like, wait, the best player in the league, the most exciting NBA player of this decade, and he could be in New York City? Nah, we're going to pass. So Philly ends up buying him for $3 million. They actually get a discount. So the Knicks think maybe they could have gotten a discount. No, they didn't care. And this sucked for Doc because he goes to the Sixers. He's with a bunch of like me first guys and ball hogs, and takes years, even though those teams were just not that fun to watch for him. He starts having knee issues. Could have gone to the Knicks and just been the guy. So 2 years later, this gets weirder. 2 years later, the Nets, they settle the territorial fee by giving the Knicks the 4th pick in the 78 draft, their number 1 pick in 1979 for the 13th pick in 78, and a settlement on all the rest of the money. And that leads to the Knicks take Michael Ray Richardson with that pick. They end up eventually trading Michael Ray Richardson for Bernard King. So they get Bernard King out of it. So in a weird way, I wrote in my book, it led to 2 wildly entertaining Michael Ray Richardson years. One, what the hell is wrong with Michael Ray season? One, awesome Bernard season. 1.5 life-altering Bernard years where he was, other than Bird, the best player in the league. And then that's it. So not so bad, but man, they could have had Kareem and Dr. J. There's no better Knicks what if than that. Donovan Mitchell, pretty good, but not anywhere close to that. So there you go. Those are my Knicks what ifs.